Let us take a moment. Relax. Ease your mind. Meditate. And now that you didn't do that, let's talk about meditations. I'm not talking about some peaceful monk garbage. I'm talking hardcore philosophy, baby. Now, Descartes was a super prominent philosopher in his heyday a really long ago, and in his prominent philosophy, he created Meditations, a collection of 6 concepts on reality and its perceptions. Descartes was focusing a lot on the nature of existence and on our approaches to finding truth and reality. Not only that, he sprinkled a lot of God in there to make extra shows in the big one's good books. The first meditation began with questioning our questioning. Throwing the reader in as a meditator along with him, he asks that we present our basis of knowledge and decide if it's absolute. Then follows up with, you can't. So what do? Build from the ground up. We sense and we perceive. But those can be wrong. So perhaps our sense itself is a deception, so it may or may not be real. We could be dreaming a perfect recreation of our day and assume it's real because of what we perceived. So, what if we're just in a dream? Throw your senses in the garbage. They probably don't exist. What else can we do? Going further into math, geometry, things you might find as absolutes, what if they're wrong? If an omnipotent, holy, good God exists, how can he create something so wrong? Well, what could it be? Demons. That's it. Demons. Doubt everything. Everything. The demons could be making it all lies. So, the first meditation sets up a framework that all reality should be doubted, because we don't know if something is deceiving us to believe it's reality. So, we go on to the second meditation. Easy peasy, nothing's real. What's the matter? Nietzsche nodding along with abandoning ship with this whole trying thing. Then it hits you. The only truth you got, buddy. You think. You can't doubt your thinking, because to doubt your thinking would be thinking about your doubt. So that's it. I think, therefore I am. Roll credits. Guess we're real, bucko. So if we think, there must be understanding. And if we can understand, there must be will. While the imagination may be filled with deceptions of perceptions of the senses, they are thought about. So at the very least, they're attached to the mind. So they must be real as well. With all this, we at least think we have a body. So as a meditatement, you must accept that we know the mind better than the body. What do we do with our thinking brains then? We'll come up with ideas, such as the idea of the third meditation. Nice transition, me. Thanks, me. So, ideas are either innate from other sources or invented by us. In any case, he uses this to say, well, if it's distinct and perceived, it's real or true. Any issues with doubt, you fill with God, because he is distinct and true. So basically, the only way to accept objective reality is God. But God needing to be distinct and true is forcing a bit of circular reasoning. And after accepting that bit anyway, reality becomes a bit of a spectrum. So we have objective reality, the reality of things they represent, and formal reality. It hurt my head at first about this, but simplifying it, objective reality is a spectrum, with God being the most objectively real, a tree being kind of real, and color being like the least real, because it's easier to be deceived about the color of something than to be deceived that a tree is a tree. Formal reality would be the same for all three, though. It's basically saying they exist. So, therefore, the tree, the God, and the color exist in the same objective reality. Ultimately, Descartes' idea of reality is organized with these two things. That which you can clearly and distinctly perceive, like size, extension, shape, and that which you can sense or can't distinctly perceive, like color, sound, so on, because one of those is easier to confuse than the other. So why is God real, you may or may not be asking? Well, because everything's God, buddy. Every idea is caused by another idea in Descartesian logic. A pebble's idea comes from a rock, light from the sun, socks from clothes. So if you keep going into the basic idea for everything, the final one is God. So let's move forth, or rather, on to the fourth meditation. Truths and falsities. If you've been following the logic, this is easy to sum up. Basically, any truth or good is reality, since that's clear and distinct. So, who's the realist? That's right, G-O-D. And with that, who's the fakest? Them lying demon boys, no good, not real things, none of that. He pretty much declares that through this, we're kind of real, like in the middle of the real spectrum. And in this freedom of will is brought up, like that as well as judgment. Judgment being final decisions, will being the right to make those decisions. Descartes says our will is infinite, so we're at God's level in that we can decide whatever we want. But our judgment, since we don't know all the right or good decisions, is finite, meaning we're less real and cannot understand God's will due to our failed judgments. The Lord works in mysterious ways and whatnot. So, the fifth meditation tries to make all those material things the meditator said aren't real into not real. How? A clear and distinct perception, silly. If we can mentally visualize something's size, shape, extension, which is like space, its motion, the number of it, or its substance, what do we get? A real thing. Boom. So what if you start doubting any of these factors? God wouldn't lie to you, silly. And God made those things, so they are real. Boom. Fixed your life. And we reach our final meditation, all of you. Feeling all good and one with the world? Well, let's be sure of that by declaring material existence absolutely, and why the mind and body are separate entities. Through imagination, we can see a triangle, understand it has three sides, and see all the things that make it real easily. So, now imagine something with 1,000 sides. It's a little bit trickier. The imagination has a hard time perceiving it, and so it's hard to declare as real this way. Not the figure, your imagination. Returning to the second meditation, the only thing that you're sure of is that you think, and you have a mind. So the imagination is declared part of the body, since it requires the likeness of external sources to reach inward and help you perceive what's imagined. Yeah, it's a lot. Still, the thousand-sided figure is real. Why? The meditator finds geometry and math to be real. They build up the properties of triangles and similar perceptions that you declare as real. So, since these principles are real to the meditator, a thousand-sided figure is no problems. Maths don't lie. So with this in mind, we use the building blocks of reality to decide that most of these things are at least somewhat real, including your body. With that in mind, Descartes declares there is a mind-body dualism. So basically, your thinking brain is definitely attached to your sense and bod. With that, boom, they must be linked entities, one that perceives and one that's absolute. And now we've meditated. Are you feeling the tranquility that comes from pure understanding? Do you feel at one? Looking at this meditation, you get an understanding of the huge impact philosophy had in this time period, as well as the major necessity of religion to help deal with a lack of understanding. From the first meditation, he immediately turns to the deceptions of reality being formulated by demons, and perceptions themselves being confused because that's what they want. The basis of most of Descartes' logic relies on the idea that God fills in the gaps, and that God is the only true objective reality in this world. In his third meditation, he declares in the spectrum of objective reality, God is the most true. It gives a sense of the necessity for God to complete his logic, or perhaps even remain reputable at the time. Considering the history of Aristotelian thought, putting other philosophers into submission basically, the ideas presented by these philosophers clearly influenced a lot of people's worldview. The schools of thought of that time were far more focused on the research done by others who just thought about things themselves. At a basic level, just building smaller ideas into bigger ones to form a philosophy of why life is as it is, and the best ways to go about it. Though it's merely a mental feat forming these theories of life, it's kind of humbling to see how these ideas formulated a groundwork for what we think today even. Speaking of, holding this time capsule of ideas and pull it over to our time today, you can feel the weight that religion has held in many people's logic even now. The fourth meditation delves into the use of God as a determination of reality, basically outlining all creation being a part of God's plan, and in his talk of the imperfection of our being likely being a part of a perfect whole of creation. It reinforces that age-old saying of God working in a mysterious way that people latch onto when they're giving up on figuring out why things aren't always good, despite a supposedly all-good God being present. The overbearing presentation that reality is only grounded with God feels like it should be abandoned in a modern mindset in my personal opinion. Yet it remains. The need for an omnipotent, almighty creator who has outlined a series of events, even my typing of this paper, our wills being infinite, our judgment being finite, all because God has a script for what needs to be in this perfect world of his. We are but dominoes going ever forward in this chain of events. It's incredibly frustrating how, despite the lack of logic and determinate evidence of God, the idea that he remains real is incredibly strong. Maybe there's some piece of me that wants to combat anything I can't clearly and distinctly perceive myself, as Descartes so vehemently advises to in his own third meditation, yet the circular logic is just a profound show of how people will hold on to any idea they see as true, defending it despite any holes within it. So I pretty much despise the religious undertones being so prevalent in this philosophy. But that's pretty much how it was in this society. In his day, religion was the basis for most of people's knowledge, and considering his limitations and use of logic, that was perfect for his time. It would be unfair to say it wasn't worth reading. There's a lot more to this theory than a simple explanation of God. It shows the capabilities of a person who thinks about everything as logically as he can. With all the doubt that plagues most of us in everything we do, I think a bit of old school rationality and thinking can really get the imagination going. Since the imagination is part of the body, it's important for you to exercise a bit. Even if you disagree with the fundamental points of this piece as I do, giving it a read may even make for some new revelation on how you perceive the world. I may not see the necessity in God, but understanding my own doubt in reality and myself, as well as expunging some of that doubt simultaneously, is sort of refreshing in a way, and more people could use that. I'd say give it a read.